Hello, and welcome to a special episode of the Shitterbowl series. This is not a traditional turn video. This is basically just an overview of my notes that I've been taking throughout the entirety of year one. Because there's a lot of information that Dominions 5 doesn't give you. It kind of does, but it is really hard to obtain, and you have to do a lot of back-breaking note-taking to gather it up. And I thought it would be somewhat interesting if I did all that, at least for year one, and then I basically put the results into Excel and I saw what I got. So that's effectively what this video is. It's looking at a bunch of more obscure stats that you don't get to see, or Dominions 5 doesn't give you, which I think is a terrible flaw of the game, by the way. But anyway, I've made some lukewarm graphs. Hopefully they're somewhat understandable. And basically, we're just going to look at them, and I'm going to talk about them. And I have a couple of sheets, too. One of these is no graphs on the luck tab, but that's just a comparison of how luck has affected everybody. So this first graph here is provinces and forts by all the nations. And I'm sure by this point you've already dissected this graph. It's not hard to see who's in the lead here. Archacephaly has the most provinces. Granted, it's by the thinnest of margins, but he does have more forts, which is quite substantial. On this present turn, though, I think Agartha is making a third fort, and I think Ulm is also making a third fort. So they will be caught up to, really leaving poor Phaecia just in the dust. And I think this is a big contributor to the overall state of Phaecia as a country, the fact that their only fort is their capital. That just enables them to be shut down so easily. Just if you disable this one fort, then they're out of the game, effectively. But the provinces, overall, I think the map has about 125 provinces on it. So after 1 year, we see the players have taken almost half, not quite, which is pretty awful. By the end of year one, you want to have, basically, if you divide the map by the number of players, in this case, if there's 125 provinces, then every player should get 25 provinces by the end of year one. Or at the very least, everyone should have 25 provinces to be equal, because everyone else is getting 25 provinces. So if you can get 25, then you got your adequate slice of the pie. You are not behind the curve. Everybody's behind the curve. And I believe I mentioned this in my turn 11 video, that everyone is like less than 50% of that 25 mark. Some people have more of an excuse than others as to why they're below, but some people don't. Some people just played expansion really poorly. And they could have had a massive advantage at this point in the game, and don't. And I think the rest of these graphs will show that a little more clearly than this one, but this is a good starting one. So this is the total gold without luck factoring in compared to each nation. So what this means is this is the amount of gold that a nation generated just off their income alone. Nothing else. This is not by events. This doesn't factor in losses of any kind. This is just purely how much gold did you make in the first year. For the first 12 turns, how much gold did you make? And Ulm is the victor. There is a little randomness to this because, it's kind of based on world spawn, how much value the provinces around you are. And what's interesting about this is even though Ulm has a couple less provinces than Archacephaly, the provinces he does have are a lot more valuable. Not just like 100 gold more, but like 300 gold more. This is a major gap between these two players. Even though Archacephaly has more infrastructure and more provinces. More infrastructure, by the way, meaning better tax income. So Ulm picked his provinces that he was going to invade a lot better than Archacephaly did. Archacephaly did not pick his provinces as well as Ulm did. The same thing can be said about Marignon. There's a even bigger gap between Ulm and Marignon, even though you would think looking at this graph they'd be identical. There's a massive gold difference between the two players. And as the game goes on, it's really only going to grow in Ulm's favor, because Marignon, you know what Marignon's doing. Agartha, Aphasia having the lowest gold makes sense. He's got the least amount of provinces, so this isn't really that noteworthy, except to point out the fact that early game expansion failures can have long-lasting implications when you get into the mid-game. Now granted, this gold gap can be made up with luck, it can be made up with better tactics, better strategy employed, it can be made up with magic, it can be made up with infrastructure, it could be made up by diplomacy, begging, like even if you have to, begging other players for gold is a valuable and underrated strategy to get this gap neutralized. Oh yeah, I suppose I should mention some of these graphs get a little tough to understand if you're colorblind, so sorry about that. But hopefully they're legible for most people. The fact that Agartha's gold is sort of on par with Marignon's is a little unfortunate since he has one more province, but he did lose. I think both these players lost early starting battles, or they both lost expansion armies in year one. Ulm, by comparison, didn't lose any, and Archaecephaly, I think, lost some too. Phasia lost, I think, just one battle, but he lost it immediately. This was like the very first turn that he lost it. And you can see the sort of implication that had. Also, he spent a lot of gold on mercenaries, and I think if he had more infrastructure instead of some of those mercenaries, that could have increased his gold. Not by very much, but I'm just thinking of ways to eke out little bits more of total income. So by far the winner in terms of tax is Ulm, but tax is not the whole story. We have to look at losses. And really there's no other way to say this, but Agartha got his dick flattened very badly. He took almost 2,000 gold worth of casualties, compared to Ulm, who lost 250, lost almost nothing. These losses, what this means is these are units that went to fight battles and died. And also it factors in PD, if you had PD that was in a province and died. Which really isn't relevant for most of them, for most of these nations, but Phasia, for example, he lost some province defense. Agartha lost some. Really this is just sort of a reflection on how well the provinces were picked and how... Basically, this is a measure of how good your scripting was when you went to go attack a province and the composition of your army that you had going into the province. And what we can learn from that is Ulmites are really good. Ulmish infantry are extremely easy mode to invade with. Like, you don't need to... It's not like Ulm really properly set up or scripted his units very well. He just sort of did the bare minimum required. And the bare minimum is leaps and bounds above the other players. He has a tremendous edge on all of them in terms of losses. What's also noteworthy is Phasia didn't lose very much at all in the first year of the game. His biggest amount of gold that he lost was on the very first turn of the game. Or, no, that's not true. I suppose it's on turn 12 when Marignon invaded him because he lost that PD. But before that turn, the most gold he lost was the very first expansion attempt he made. And beyond that, he didn't lose practically anything. He was mainly losing like one or two mercenary units, which mercenaries are factored into these losses, but only if the entire mercenary company was wiped out. And that loss is just the amount of gold they paid. So most of Phasia's losses here are from his very first failure to expand, and then his mercenary companies getting killed. He lost almost nothing outside of those two instances, compared to Agartha, who was bleeding troglodyte slaves almost every turn. Marignon lost a lot too, but in bits and pieces. More towards the latter half of year 1, he started losing lots of expensive units routinely in his provinces. Archaecephaly was just bleeding badly, much like Agartha was. It's just his units aren't as expensive as Agartha's. The chariots are not as pricey, so he could lose more of them and not have it be as big a downside. But he was losing stuff every turn. Most turns, Ulm lost nothing. Let's see. Let me count that up one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, never mind. A third of the turns, much less than half, a third of the turns in year 1, Ulm lost nothing. But he was still taking provinces during that time. And so when you factor all of the losses in, the net gold of the nations really shifts. So something to note is this is incorporating losses, and it's incorporating luck income as well. This is not incorporating luck infrastructure or luck units or luck gems. This is just if you gained or lost straight gold on a luck event, it was factored into this graph. And look who's actually at the bottom. It's Agartha, which I don't think any of the players realize that Agartha is actually in the weakest position in terms of how much gold he has. I don't think he would be the easiest nation to run over because he has 2 forts and is soon to have a third. But this is a reflection of army size. This is a reflection of how much infrastructure you can hold. Agartha has the smallest army in the game. And that's partially due to his losses. Like, if you exclude his losses, you can see how much difference it makes. It puts him at 3rd place versus dead last, and not by a small margin. This is a huge gap, hundreds of gold below the other lower place. You would presume Fascia would be the bottom, but he's not. In fact, I think this bodes very poorly for Marignon, who really has to make extreme gains in his war against Fascia to win. He may be thinking Fascia's sort of on the weaker end because he only has his capital and failed some expansions, which is true. Fascia does have terrible weaknesses by only having 1 fort, but his army size is big, very big, almost identical to Marignon's. So really, it's more of a skill matchup than anything else. Comparatively, Ulm is the front runner by a wide margin. Not even close. Basically, he is so far ahead. This is like starting to snowball out of control. This is getting to the point where if Ulm just keeps growing and no one disturbs him, I predict he will win this game. I think from these charts alone, the number 1 player that I think is, or at least set to win, is Ulm by at least a 1,500 gold margin. And then from that, I would say whoever wins the Fascia-Marignon war has a good shot of winning if they could take the other person's capital. But I think that war is just going to be a long, grindy stalemate. I think both of these players are just going to see these graphs drain over time as they burn their gold, killing each other with no gains, while Ulm, Archaecephaly, and Agartha rise up. Unfortunately, Agartha's got a long way to go, a big lead they have to overcome. But thankfully, Agartha can do that, because Agartha, more than any of these other nations really, can really start to rely on gems for their army size versus gold. Archaecephaly's gold is actually very inflated because of luck here. Archaecephaly's gold would be much lower. You know, if you actually look at this, this is like, he would be at 1620 or something, or no, he would be at 720. So he would be around Marignon's level, but he is being bumped to second place purely off of his luck. And this is not incorporating all of Archaecephaly's luck, which we'll get to soon. But I thought this was interesting. This is basically the big reward of doing all this work, is being able to see, oh, okay, Marignon and Fascia, even though maybe Marignon feels he has the initiative here, he really doesn't. He really doesn't have the initiative. Like, he has to outplay his opponent on a strategic scale in order to win. This is not a war I would take. This is a future that is going to be long and grindy and ultimately destructive on probably both players. But that's just my prediction. Marignon did assassinate that Horse Tribe cavalry commander on that province in Fascia's cap circle. If he wipes out that army, that's a big chunk of gold. And it's those types of chunks of gold that you have to delete from your opponent in order to beat them efficiently. But for instance, if Marignon went up against Agartha, I think Marignon would just crush him. I think he would just, this would be a lot more one-sided. And also furthermore, I think if Ulm fought anybody, Ulm would trounce them at this point in the game. And I think this lead's only going to grow as Ulm gets his evocation spells, as he gets his construction economy, gem economy going. Archaecephaly, though, is a big Ulm counter with Ulmish poor magic resistance, so Archaecephaly could put up a fight. Anyway, this is the last graph. It's probably the most difficult to understand. And really, it's not actually that fun to look at. But basically what this is a measure of gem, not income. This is just total gem storage. So these are all the gems that the players have in storage, sorted by type. So B is blood, nature, death, astral, earth, water, air, and fire. So everyone, you know, basically all the players have at least one type of gem that they have in excess. Fascia has air, Agartha has earth, Marignon has fire, Ulm has earth, and Arco has astral pearls. But in terms of total gems, you can see Archaecephaly is really head and shoulders above everyone else. Marignon has not reached the 75 gem total, and Archaecephaly is halfway to 125. Archaecephaly has a huge lead on gems, and I think this is mainly because his research is so poor. I didn't make a chart for research mainly because the differences between all the players is extremely minimal, but Ulm is in the lead, followed by Agartha. But because of Archaecephaly's site searching, that may lead you to believe that Archaecephaly has earned this extra gem income because he's site searching so determinedly, he has gained this edge over Marignon, who by comparison has done no site searching realistically. He's just, I mean, he's done like little bits. Or Agartha, who is doing a chunk. Fascia is, like, basically all these three players are doing very little site searching compared to, well, Ulm's also not doing that much site searching. He just isn't, he's just bigger. He just has more mages to spare. His nation pumps out more mages than anyone else except Marignon, so he can get more site searching done. Also, Agartha is really the only player to have spent his gems. He's been spending a lot of earth gems. He would be, I think, maybe 10 earth gems higher, putting him above Fascia, if he had not casted Attentive Statues at all, which he's cast, I think, 4 or 5 times at this point. So he's actually the first one to start spending his gems. These people are sitting on their gems, largely, so we'll have to see how they get used. I'm sure Fascia will put these 24 air gems to use and their astral pearls using Mind Burn. and Lightning Bolt, and I'm sure Marignon will eventually start using these F-Gems to cast Fireball and other fire spells, fire elementals, and so on. But let's look at luck. So this is not, there's no chart here, because I couldn't really produce a chart for this. But the important thing to note for each nation are their scales. Is there some way I can, like, oh, well, whatever. Are their scales. So Archaecephaly and Ulm are both running 3 luck. They're both running super high luck. And the other 3 players are running 2 misfortune, very meta. So this column here is basically all the gold, straight gold changes. So Archaecephaly has got the most gold deposits randomly found. Ulm is kind of unlucky that he hasn't got any. However, even the misfortune people have got gold. So Marignon and Fascia's, their gold income, this number, is a little inflated because of gold they've got. Whereas Agartha has not got any. I think Agartha actually lost one. However, importantly is this, which may be a little difficult to digest. But basically what this means is these are the amount of gems that the player has gotten sorted by type. Archaecephaly has got, what is that, 15, 17, 18, 20. He's got 21 gems off of luck. 21 gems, which isn't exactly the difference between him and Ulm. I think it's not. But this is a huge reason for this gap between the 2 players, is because of this luck. Now that said, Ulm has also got a lot of gems himself. He's got 20, not as much as Archaecephaly, but still a huge amount of gems. Compared to the other players, Marignon's got 8, Agartha has got 7, Fascia's got none. So this is not to say that luck is purely responsible for this gem gap. There are other things involved, but basically, luck is a huge contributor to this gap here. This is a 20 gem upgrade for these 2 players, and kind of like a 4-ish gem average for these guys. So the difference in luck is basically being able to access gems that you wouldn't normally be able to get. Like, you don't expect Ulm, of all people, to have water gems. Certainly not 11 of them. And this is pretty good. Ulm recently got his Pretender God out, so he can actually make, say, Shambler skin armor from that guy, because he's got water 1. And he could put that on a Black Knight or Black Lord, give him some armor, send him underwater, and, you know, if it's light enough, he could kill it. And now suddenly Ulm's underwater on, like, turn 14 or 15. Which is pretty crazy. And he could keep going, too. So this is, like, luck is not just the extra gem income that it gives you, but it's the extra access that it gives you that also makes it really special. Like Archaecephaly has blood slaves, otherwise I wouldn't have even put blood on here. Luck can give you blood slaves too, and if you get enough blood slaves, you can become a blood nation. I can't say for certain whether that will come in or not, but I suppose it's possible that the 3 luck nations could see that happening. Other things that happened, Archaecephaly got a temple infrastructure, which is worth 450 gold. That is not calculated here, but Archaecephaly does have a free temple that they got. And they got a lightning rod, which is worth 5 earth gems. Ulm got a hero unit. Marignon and Agartha both lost a province. Oops. They both lost a province to a random event. And Marignon, I didn't really know how to categorize this, but they lost their province defense on their capital. Basically, I didn't factor that into any chart. I'm just listing it here because that is something of note. He did lose a lot of PD. And generally, capitals are supposed to have a lot of PD. Also, something I didn't list here, but that routinely happened for all the 2 misfortune nations, is constant unrest events, constant misfortune events. And those things contribute to your tax income, contributes to these numbers. That's not to say that the deficit in these numbers is caused by your misfortune scales, but it definitely helped to get into this bottom tier part of the game. Provinces and taking provinces and keeping units alive is a lot more important, but I did want to bring that up, that those misfortune nations did have that happen to them. So that's really all the dissection I care to do on these charts. I don't know if I will do this for year 2, because as the game goes on, there's just going to be more and more calculations, and the numbers are going to grow even further, especially with research. My God, that would be such an incredible pain to tabulate constantly, but we'll see. Maybe I'll do it. Depends. I suppose if year 2 is as passive as year 1 has been, which it surely will not, then maybe I'll do something. We'll see. Anyway, I hope this was helpful and or interesting.